Hi everyone, it's Katie and today I have a deck review for you. I have had this deck for a long time. It was one of my earlier deck purchases and it is one that I have continued to love and use regularly, and that is the Hezicos Tarot by Mary Griffin. This is an independently published deck. It's beautifully produced and it is still in print. So if this is something that interests you, please keep on watching. So we'll start with the specifics. Comes in a great little hard box that is two-parter, opens up like this. It's kind of like this, it's supposed to be like a package that's wrapped up. It's very cute. There's a little white book included. It's not very big, but I do think it's sufficient. It's effective. And it has a bit of an introduction about the artist, and then she talks a little bit, just 2 pages, about the artwork itself, which is really cool. And then she's got a little bit about cleansing the deck, shuffling the cards, a tiny bit about reverse cards and using significators. And then we have a few spreads. We have a 3-card spread, the Romany spread, and an explanation of the Celtic cross. And then we jump right into the card meanings. And this is roughly how much information you get for each card, about half a page. And we do have the little colored representations of the cards, which is awesome. With the major arcana, we start with a little like kind of descriptive paragraph. Then we have the card meaning and the reverse meaning. For the minor arcana, we don't have that little descriptive section so much, but we do have the card meaning and the reversed for every card. So it's about 50 pages long, not too big, but there's enough in here, and it's very cute. It kind of looks like a little exercise book that someone's taken along with them into this little world, and they've documented what they've found. So the cards. I adore this deck. This is the backing, which is reversible, including even just the little signature in the corners. So it's quite cute, like a foresty sort of green. In terms of card size, this is a Rider-Waite, a standard Rider-Waite. It's a little bit shorter and a little bit wider. So it's a bit wider. Maybe this way's a better way. But a little bit shorter. So I actually really like the size of the cards. And a really fun part about this deck is that it's borderless, which means the whole card is filled with these beautiful images and colours. And the cardstock is nice. It's not glossy at all. It's kind of slick, and it's like a good sturdy but still very flexible cardstock. I mentioned this deck recently in my top 12 working decks, the decks that I use in readings for other people. And this is one of my most used decks, especially in readings for other people, although I do love using it for myself as well. But it is so used, and yet the edges aren't super like banged up or chipped. They are a little bit that you notice on the back because they're a bit darker, but on the front you don't really notice it at all. They look like they're in really good condition and that I haven't used them very much. And I do riffle shuffle my cards as well as overhand. I mean, I'm, you know, not really rough on them, but I think the way that they've held up is a testament to the quality of the cards. Now, in terms of the images, the colours in this deck are beautiful. They're watercoloured images, and they're just so cute and pretty. This is very much like a little, it's a separate world in and of itself. And as you can see, we have the titles in a, you know, kind of inoffensive font up the top, which means that they're very clearly labelled, but the label isn't distracting. Now the quartz are an interesting thing, and we'll get to those. But the world that these cards depict is a bit of a fairy tale one. It's a fae one. There's a lot of gnomes and different fairy creatures and sprites. It's very cute. It's also very much a Rider-Waite inspired deck. A lot of the cards look very familiar in terms of their actual imagery. Some of them deviate a little bit, but they certainly maintain the traditional meanings of the Rider-Waite Smith cards. The aces are very simple, and throughout the deck you will notice that there's a lot of these little faces, like on wands, on swords. They're just kind of everywhere. I think the colours are beautiful, and where necessary, they are quite rich. This Devil card is quite a powerful card, and I think this is a great card, as well as a few others, that represent how real this deck still is. As cute and as fey as this deck is, it's still pretty intense when it needs to be. It certainly doesn't shy away from those harder cards. And this Judgment card I think is one of my favourites. You know, it kind of has hints of the traditional, with kind of an angel figure, although she's more a mermaid with wings. And she's blowing what kind of is the shape of a horn, but it's a shell. And we have other mermaid sprite figures kind of jumping up and flying up into the air. So it's got like enough of the traditional, but it's done in a really beautiful way that certainly suits the theme of the deck. The Death card is another beautiful one. The colours are really, really lovely. The coins in this deck are represented by these little Hezicos coins, which is kind of cute. So they're just like the currency of this world. Three of Swords, again, with that kind of really dark, rich background and the very, very vibrant, deep red of the heart. It's really pretty. I love how a lot of the images, the background is really quite detailed and pretty. Like we have a lot of these mountains with winding pathways and little trees and things, and the skies are all really, really beautifully done as well. This is one of my favorite cards. I love the dragon, and then I adore the colors. So it is quite traditional. We only have one person in the boat, but it's just beautiful. Four of Rods. It's just really, really, really cute. And we have the Two of Coins. And the Hanged Man. Three of Rods. Again with kind of like the swirling pathways winding up the mountains, and these little houses kind of like on this weird little ledge. It sometimes almost reminds me of Dr. Seuss, I think, with like the balloons and the houses and things. It's just really, really cute. This is one of my favorite cards, and it's actually, I think, the card that made me buy this deck. It was Kate from dailytarotgirl.com that uses this deck quite a bit, or she used to. And I fell in love with this deck watching her channel, and she spoke about how different decks will represent different cards, and how that kind of changes the meaning a little bit for us, or the interpretation we might come to. And she used this card as an example, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. I'll see if I can find that video and I'll link it below. I love this Four of Cups. Very traditional sort of feeling to it, but you know, just with the kind of Hezicos quirk with her hair up in the air. Five of Rods, we have the rods fighting, which I love. And the Four of Swords is another card that I just really, really liked, and that appealed to me when I saw this deck online before I purchased it. Eight of Coins. Hierophant is another card that I really liked. I think it's one of the cards, the first Hierophant cards that I kind of really got, that I really connected to. Like there's an ancient oldness to this guy, and then we also have the really narrow window, which, you know, might suggest a narrow view, a narrow perspective. That's certainly not the only interpretation of this card, and it's not inherently a negative view of the Hierophant, but it certainly kind of added to or helped me understand the card a little bit better. The Ten of Swords is a good example of how this deck does maintain some of the, you know, the severity of some of the more negative cards, or the harder cards. The Ten of Swords is a good example of that. It's quite gory, it's quite intense, I think, especially because it's such a cute little creature and he's just impaled on these mushrooms, but it's still pretty intense. And the Five of Coins, although very pretty, the colours and things, it certainly really does display that hardship quite well. Now let's have a little bit of a chat about the courts, because I do think that they were something that put me off a little bit when deciding to purchase this deck, and I know that others sometimes feel similarly. They are quite stark. They're very simple. They're a close-up portrait. For the pages and knights, they're like side-on portraits. And then for the kings and queens, they are direct face-on portraits. So, you know, there's not like a scene going on, or, you know, they're not sitting in a certain chair or riding a certain horse. There's not a lot to go on, and I think that can be intimidating, especially to newer readers. But the guidebook is certainly helpful. It really does, it kind of briefly describes the character in the card, and I think once you kind of get to know them, they certainly have a personality that does embody the inherent card meaning. And I think she's done a really good job, Mary Griffin, of kind of bringing the character to life in a really simple way through a portrait. I also love how diverse these courts are. They all look very, very different, and there's different ethnicities represented. And also each of the suits has a very different colour. It's quite light and pastel, but the coins are kind of like a yellowy background. The cups are a blue. Rods are a green. And the swords are like a light purple colour. So they all have a somewhat fantasy, tribal look to them in terms of, you know, what they're wearing and their hairstyles, which does kind of mean that they still relate very much to the theme of the deck. Most of the mages are human, whereas it's the minor arcana that kind of really goes all out with the gnomes and the fairies. So that's a bit of a look at the deck. As for my experience with these cards, it's one of my favorite decks. It's one of my go-to decks. It's just one of those staples in my collection that I know will continue to be a staple. It's such an easy deck to read and connect with, or at least it has been for me. I adore the colors. It's really quite playful and bright and colorful, but this deck is really cheeky. It definitely has that more mischievous fae energy to it. I remember I was doing a reading for someone, a snail mail reading, so I was writing out, I kind of begin my readings, you know, saying hello, and then I'll explain what deck I'm using, and maybe a little bit of a brief kind of, you know, why I like the deck or why I'm using it. It's only a sentence or two, but I was saying I was going to use the Hezicos Tarot because it's such a pretty, playful deck. Then I draw the Ten of Swords. That's the sort of deck this is, where it will kind of throw you a curveball when you least expect it, just because it kind of enjoys seeing you react. It's how it feels with this deck. So it definitely has a mischievous, cheeky, playful energy to it, and I think sometimes it's a little deceiving. It's deceptive. It looks like it's just going to be sweet and sugary and really simple, and it certainly has that element to it, but then underlying all of that is a real mischievous sort of spirit to the deck. And I think that's why I love it so much. It's very easy to read, it's very pretty, the colors are lovely, it's traditional enough to, you know, easily read, but it's still got its own personality and a few cards that are new takes on the cards. But ultimately it's fun to work with this deck because of its personality. It just keeps me guessing, and it's just a joy to work with, and it's certainly a deck that I have had a lot of fun using. And as I said, I use it for both myself and so often when I'm doing snail mail tarot readings and readings for other people, because I really trust this deck to give me messages not only that are clear and that I can communicate effectively, but that are also relevant. I've had great feedback working with this deck. It's just a dependable deck as well as a really fun one to work with. This artwork isn't for everybody, I understand that, but if this is something that appeals to you, I couldn't recommend it more highly. The quality of it, the construction of the box and the cards and even the little guidebook, I think it's fabulous. I think you're getting value for money in terms of what you get, you know, just practically. But then also the artwork's beautiful and the deck is just a really, really great one that I'm so glad to have. So I'll very quickly shuffle and draw us a card just so I can read out what is in the guidebook so you can get an idea of what to expect. We have the Fool. It's very pretty. I like this card a lot. It's very, very obviously the Fool. You know, we can recognize it. But it certainly has a little Hezicos spin to it. So we'll have a quick look. The Fool. A young man places his foot at the very edge of a cliff. One false move and he will fall. He shows no fear. One of his dogs stands looking at him, imploring him to move away. The other stands guard. Card meaning. The Fool card heralds the start of a fresh beginning. Opportunities will come forward now. Trust your intuition. You are about to start something new. A word of warning, be vigilant. Look carefully first. Do not rush into anything you might regret later. And the reverse meaning. Be aware of a lack of action. A feeling of wanting to give up, being careless in situations, a state of apathy and neglect. rushing into a relationship or business venture without careful consideration first. So those are the things to be cautious of or think about if the card comes up reverse or in shadow, depending on how you read. And I think I like the little description of the cards just because, you know, especially if you're starting out, kind of helps you focus on the different symbolism that is included in the card. Although this deck certainly isn't, you know, steeped in occult symbolism, everything that's chosen is chosen purposefully. You know, even the dogs and their positions and what they're looking at has been chosen purposefully. So that little description kind of helps you get to know the deck and the intention that's gone into it. And then the card meaning is quite a simple, basic meaning of the card, but it's certainly enough to kind of get you going and get you introduced to this deck, especially if you haven't really worked with a lot of decks before. So that's my little review. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it helpful. If you have any comments or questions about this deck, please leave them below. I'll do my best to get back to you. If you have this deck, feel free to share your opinions or your experience in the comments below so other people can see that. And I will see you all again next time. Much love. Bye.